All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Legal Lunch and Learn, a weekly live show where we ask an expert your question on a legal topic. My name is Cindy. I am a staff attorney here at Maryland Legal Aid. Joining me today is our co-host, the Director of Community Lawyer Initiative, Attorney Megan McDermott. Our production
Cindy.
Hi. Our production engineer is Alex Chase. She is working in the background tirelessly to make sure that everything is running smoothly today. Joining us today is our expert on tax sales, attorney Robin Jacobs. Hi, Robin.
Hi.
So, dear viewers, if you do have questions about tax sales, make sure you put them in a comment down below, or you can private message us if you would like to remain anonymous. Of course, if you have immediate legal issues, make sure you're contacting us. We'll put our comment in the comment section down. Oh, we'll put our contact information. There we go. In our comment section down below if you need it. And for those who need to hear it, our email here is lawyer@mdlab.org. That's LAWYER@mdlab.org. Our phone number here is 443-451-2805. And just before we get started, a couple of disclaimers. To begin, just because you watch our videos religiously every Tuesday at noon, it does not establish an attorney-client relationship between you, any of the attorneys here, or with Maryland Legal Aid. And again, if you do need immediate assistance with a legal issue, make sure you're contacting us for one-on-one consultations. And of course, for those who do need captions, our videos are uploaded to YouTube to also generate those captions for you. So make sure you check out those videos if that's what you need. So with all of that out of the way, and again, every time I do this, it sounds like our intro is getting longer, but I promise we're getting there. So with all of that out of the way, I'm going to welcome our guest today. Hi, Robin. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Well, first, I'm doing really well. So first of all, I want to really thank you for being here. I know you're super busy, especially during this season. So talk to us very briefly about your experience in tax sales.
Sure. So my interest in tax sale actually goes back to a position I held at Community Law Center when I was representing several community groups around issues of vacant and abandoned properties. The owner of those properties had actually picked them up in tax sale foreclosure, and I just learned a bit about the system and started a work group kind of as a study group to start out, and that's how I met some of the great advocates at Maryland Legal Aid who work on tax sale foreclosure from the homeowner side. So a few years later, here I am now at Maryland Legal Aid. I represent elderly homeowners who are facing foreclosure, including tax foreclosure. So it's kind of a special interest of mine. So I'm happy to be here talking about it.
Well, thank you so much. So let's go ahead and dive into tax sales. It is one of those topics that I think even a lot of attorneys don't really understand. So just start with the ABCs of tax sale. First of all, what is it?
Sure. So one thing that's important to note at the outset is that tax sale kind of differs from county to county. So I'm probably most familiar with Baltimore City, but generally speaking, tax sale is the system by which cities and counties in Maryland collect property taxes. So property taxes that are past due. So the taxes become a lien on the property, and then the lien is sold to a private investor in an auction that's usually held in the spring. In Baltimore City, it's in May usually. And then if no one comes forward to pay the property taxes, that investor can file a foreclosure in circuit court and eventually take ownership to the property.
All right, so I'm going to slow down the process a little and let's get into the nitty gritty just a little bit, because I think a lot of people facing this issue might not understand all the steps that's involved. Because I think when you get a notice saying that, hey, your tax is overdue, they don't really tell you the timeline or how much time you have to try to rectify this problem, or what you can do in the meantime. So let's start all the way in the beginning. Let's say I wasn't able to pay my property tax. What happens next?
So if you haven't paid your property tax, you should get notices from the city or county about them being past due. I would note that unlike maybe some other bill collectors, they're not going to hound you about this bill though. So one thing that kind of creates problems for a lot of our clients is that you might get one or two notices about it, but you might be facing other bills. It's really important to prioritize your property tax bill because they can lead to the loss of your home. So even though you might not be getting calls all the time about the bill, it's important to open those notices from the city or county where you live in. And I know they're scary. It's always scary to get past due bills. So there's this tendency to just try to push it out of your mind. I just encourage folks to open up those bills and also to seek assistance because there are options out there for people facing tax sale. And I'm just at the outset, the thing that I'm probably going to mention as many times as I possibly can here is the homeowner's property tax credit. So if you are struggling to pay your property tax bills, you should be applying for the homeowner's property tax credit every year. And it's an application that's due to the State Department of Assessments and Taxation, and it comes out early in the year, like February or March of every year. You should complete it as early as possible and send it into the State Department of Assessments and Taxation. It can take some time for them to process it, and they might have follow-up questions that you might need to provide additional documentation. But what that tax credit does is it will lower your property tax bill maybe to something closer to what you can afford. So I just really encourage people to apply for that tax credit early and apply for it every year. So it is an application that you have to send in every year.
How long does a person have to send in these applications? Is there a deadline?
Yeah, so the deadline was extended this year to October 31st, so you still have some time to apply for this year. The advantage to applying earlier in the year is that when your property tax bill comes out in the summer, the credit will appear. So, then you might be able to afford the bill, whereas before, if you hadn't gotten the credit, it might be too much for you to afford. So the other thing I'll note is if you're over 70, you can actually apply for 3 years of retroactive tax credits. So if you forgot 1 year, you can go back and apply for that previous year. So I'd encourage folks who maybe missed a year's application to go ahead and apply for those past years. Another tax credit I'll just mention briefly, a different tax credit is called the Homestead property tax credit. That's a one-time application, and you can't apply for it retroactively, but it's available to people who occupy their homes, so owner-occupied properties, and it can give you a reduction in increases on property taxes. So it basically helps you out. If your property taxes are going up every year, it'll lower that increase and maybe make your property taxes a little more affordable.
Yep. Just I know we're kind of working backwards in the process a little bit, talking about lowering the bill. Does only property tax trigger a tax sale, or are there other kind of liens on the property that might also trigger a tax sale?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that because that's something that really confuses folks, including me sometimes when I get a case. So it's not just your property taxes. Obviously, that's the one you think of for tax sale, but other bills can also be considered liens on the property. So in Baltimore City, for example, if you also forgot to mow your lawn and you got a high grass and weeds citation, that actually rolls into the tax sale along with the property taxes. So property taxes are defined pretty broadly to include other sorts of charges that can be attached to the property by the municipality. I should just to note one more credit idea is that you should check with your local jurisdiction because there are other credits for veterans and folks like that, disabled. So just check with social services or your local taxing jurisdiction to see what other credits might be available to you.
Yep, absolutely. And of course, we'll provide links and phone numbers after once we gather them, and we'll put them in the comment section down below as well for those who do need to take a look. So let's get back on track in terms of the timeline. So let's talk about the first notice that usually goes out when you're behind on your property tax or any other kind of lien. About when in the year does that first go out?
So you get your bill in the summer, and then the property tax sale calendar kind of starts in a normal year in February. And so that's when, again, it'll differ a little bit from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. from like different counties, but you should get a notice from the city or county that you live in around February. And if you can afford to pay the bill then, go ahead and pay the bill then. Look into any of those credits, including those retroactive credits I just talked about, and apply for those if you haven't already. And you have until about April, usually the end of April. Again, this is sort of focused on Baltimore City, but most of the other counties follow a similar calendar, to get yourself out of this tax sale. So the sale will be happening generally in May, and you have until about 1 month before the sale to pay what's due on the property taxes to avoid the tax sale.
Do you only get one notice, or are there multiple notices that come to you?
So you should get more than one notice. In the city, like I said, you get the bill in the summer, so that's kind of your first notice. And then you should get another notice in the city. It's called a final bill and legal notice. And you have until, I think it's the end of February, to pay the amount that appears on that bill. And then the city will, the thing to know about tax sale is that some of the costs and expenses will start to creep up as the process goes on. So one of the early costs is the city will add additional costs for advertising for the sale. Those are fairly nominal costs, but the final bill and legal notice you have until the end of February, and then the city will advertise for the tax sale. So there's a couple other costs that get added on. So you might have to talk to the tax collector to see what the amount is that you owe, in order to avoid the sale if you're paying after that date at the end of February. There's also a notice that goes out in the city after the tax sale. So letting the owner know that the property went to the sale and to the investors that picked it up. And then there's some more notices that happen we'll kind of get into, I think, as we
Yep,
go through the timeline.
As we move down the timeline. So before we get too much further, what if you cannot pay it in a lump sum, by the end of February? Let's say you might be coming to some money later, or maybe you can work out several payments, throughout the year. Can you negotiate that, or does it have to be all done at once?
So unfortunately, currently the city doesn't do payment plans with folks. I mean, I really just encourage people to pay as much as they can, to get, out of the sale. There is a threshold amount that goes into the sale, but I'm always cautious because those extra costs get added on. If you can bring the balance to zero, that's really the best thing to do. Of course, if you don't pay the full amount all at once at this point in the process, it's not like the city or county won't accept that payment. I think that they generally would, but it's better to pay as much as you can to get the balance down to zero if possible.
So what's the limit that the lien has to hit before it goes to tax sale?
So that depends. Unfortunately, I know that's like a lawyer's favorite answer to questions, is it really depends on whether the property is classified as owner occupied. So that's why it's important to do that homestead tax credit. That will ensure that your property is properly classified if you're an owner as your principal residence. Also, if the property is vacant and abandoned. So there's just various categories of properties in the tax law. I think that's what makes tax sale so complicated. The threshold, I think, the lowest threshold is like $250, if I'm not mistaken, but it's more like $750 for owner occupied, and those amounts have gone up. Like in Baltimore City, I think we got it. The tax sale work group got it pushed up to more than that. But generally speaking, I don't encourage people to just do, bring the balance down to 749, because you're really risking that those other costs might push you back into the tax sale. So, pay the full bill if you can, and then pay as much as you can if you can't pay the full bill, to take it down as low as possible.
All right. So now that you got your notice and you're still unable to pay, or you can't pay below below the threshold amount, what happens next? Does it go directly to sale now?
So if you haven't paid, then it will go to the sale, and that generally happens in May. The important thing to know, a lot of our clients who come in with these notices think they've lost the house when the property goes to tax sale, and that's not quite the case. This is a process, so your rights to the house haven't been lost until the very end, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. So you have what's called a right to redeem from the tax sale all the way up until there's a judgment and a tax foreclosure. So redeeming is kind of the key thing. If you're after the tax sale, your goal is to redeem, which basically means paying whatever's due. So you have a right to redeem and hold on to the house at that point. But as I said before, the costs are going to start to go up. So what might have been, you know, affordable at the beginning of this process is going to start to creep up as the process goes on. So once you're past the tax sale, and I would just encourage people anywhere in this process to consult an attorney because it is really complicated. So if you've gone to tax sale, I would talk to an attorney to try and figure out exactly what your rights are.
Yep, absolutely. And we at Maryland Legal Aid is right here for those tax sale questions. If you do need to talk to an attorney one-on-one. So let's just go back to the tax sale, but real quick. So what exactly happens at the sale? And if I am the homeowner, do I have a right to be there when it takes place?
So the sale, again, this is going to differ on cities and counties, but in Baltimore City, it's actually an online sale. So investors register to bid in the tax sale process. I think they used to do in-person tax sales years ago, but I know Baltimore City's is online. I'm not super familiar with how other counties do it. But after the sale, like I said, there should be 2 notices from the purchaser that the owner gets before a foreclosure files. So so you should get notices throughout this process. And there's legally required notices. So if you aren't getting a notice, that can be a problem. And again, that's where you really need an attorney to help navigate those rights.
Right. And how long so right after tax sale, how long do I have to redeem?
Yeah, so again, this is going to kind of depend. Like for instance, in Baltimore City, the tax sale purchaser in an owner-occupied property, the tax sale purchaser can't file a foreclosure until 9 months after the sale. So the sale's in May, and then there should be 2 notices that go out prior to that foreclosure being filed. So, but again, if your house is in what's called substantial need of repair in Baltimore City, they can file the foreclosure 60 days after the sale. So again, the kind of place you live in and the condition of the house, the property might be on a different track, either a faster track for abandoned properties or for properties in need of substantial repair, and you have a longer timeline to redeem if you're owner-occupied property in Baltimore City. But
Right.
that's going to really differ from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. So that's why I always say, consult an attorney, because I know a little bit about Baltimore cities, but every county is a little different. And every purchaser is a little different as well. So it's a little hard to predict exactly how long an owner has, because it just depends on how aggressive the plaintiff is in pursuing the foreclosure.
Right. So they don't have to file a foreclosure right after your time for redemption ends, right? They could
So
wait technically.
so the time for redemption continues into the foreclosure. So
Oh, okay. Yeah.
the process is the tax sale is in May, and then there's a couple notices that the tax sale purchaser has to give, and then a month after the second of those notices, they can file the foreclosure. The homeowner and any interested party in the foreclosure, so that would include like a mortgage company, if you have a mortgage, can redeem the house from the tax sale at any point before a judgment in the foreclosure. So the foreclosure is filed, and then the plaintiff has to serve everybody. So just they have to give notice to everybody with an interest in the property. Another kind of case that we get pretty frequently at Legal Aid is when someone's living in the house of a relative and the relative has passed away, but maybe nobody's opened an estate. So if you're in that situation, if you're an heir to the property, you also have a right to redeem. So anyone can kind of come forward at any point in this process to pay the taxes. The problem is once a complaint to foreclose the rights to redeem has been filed, the tax sale purchaser can add on costs and fees, including attorney's fees, which can range from like $1,200 to I think $1,500 in a case. So a lot of time it's in the city.
Sorry.
Am I going too fast?
No. Just jump in before I forget. I hear that there's a limit to how much attorney fees you can ask. Is $1,500 the limit in Baltimore City?
Yeah. So it's $1,200. It's $1,300 when the foreclosure is filed. I always have to look this up myself. So it's $1,300 when it's filed, and then it's $1,500 later in the process. But there's also, they can tack on $1,200 for opening an estate. They can also charge for postage, process of process fees, court filing fees, title search fees. So there's all of these other fees and costs. And in the law, there are limits to those fees and costs. So they shouldn't be charging more than those. But it's just important for the owner to know, you might have a $750 bill, but once you start adding $1,500 of attorney's fees and all of those costs, it can be, a much bigger bill than what you had before. And in order to stop the foreclosure from moving forward, the owner has to pay both the attorney's fees and costs, the tax sale purchaser's costs, and the city or county taxes. So it becomes kind of a two-step process generally to redeem in the city. And a lot of times people get confused because they'll pay one of those bills, but not the other. And if you only pay one of them, the foreclosure unfortunately can continue to move forward.
Right. So it sounds like the amount you had to pay goes up exponentially the later in the process you get.
Right. And I should notice too that in addition to those costs and fees that they're allowed to charge under the law, there's interest as well. So each county sets its interest rate, and it can be really high. So in the city, it can be up to 18% interest. So that's going to continue to accrue as well, and can be another source of expenses that, again, the earlier you can get to the issue, the better off you'll be. And that's why I'm such a fan of the tax credit, because a little bit of prevention is worth a pound of cure in this situation.
Right. And what if you don't have any money at that point?
So there's a couple of options if you don't have all of the money. Again, the city and the tax sale purchasers, in our experience, do not negotiate payment plans. So that's one of the things that can be really hard in this situation. So one thing to consider is if you're eligible for a Chapter 13 bankruptcy. A bankruptcy can be a really good option if maybe you don't have all of the money now, but you have you have a little bit of money to put towards it every month. The way a Chapter 13 bankruptcy works is you would be able to pay out the amount you owe over the course of 5 years. You have to, again, that's a whole complicated another topic for you for another lunch and learn, but
yes.
But talk to a bankruptcy attorney and see if that's an option for you, if you can do that. The other thing is really working with HUD certified housing counselors or financial planners, financial counselors, making sure you're getting all the social services and benefits that you qualify for. One thing I noticed with a lot of my clients, I noticed that they aren't applying for all of the discounts they could get. So in the city, for example, there's the water discount, like I said, the homeowner's tax credit, just making sure that all of those benefits you're eligible for, that you're applying for them and applying for them every year to reduce those costs. While
we're talking about applying for benefits, if the property's already gone through tax sale, no foreclosure has been filed yet. Can I still apply for those credit? And does the answer change if, a foreclosure complaint has been brought?
For the tax credits?
Mhm.
Yeah, so at that point, you're probably past the deadline for the tax credits, to be honest. But don't forget, if you're over 70, you have a right to apply for 3 years of retroactive tax credits. So a number of tax sale cases I've seen, I've been able to apply for retroactive tax credits, and that actually gets that plus, maybe some amount from the owner gets them out of tax sale. So, that's why it's important to apply before the deadlines. But if you do find yourself in tax sale, you can contact the tax credit office and see if they're willing to let you apply late. Again, if you're over 70, you have a right to do that.
Right.
If you're not eligible for a bankruptcy and you can't get the funds together at this point in the process, I think it is worth looking where else, apply for housing assistance or because eventually the property will go to judgment. So you need to, be prepared for having to leave the property.
Right. So now we're towards the end of the process, and so let's say you did get a tax foreclosure judgment. What happens then? Like, does this officially mean you lost the property and there's no way to get it back?
So generally, unless that judgment is reversed or vacated, and those are kind of rare situations, the purchaser has a right to the property, and the homeowner, that's the point at which the homeowner loses the right to redeem. So the process in the city is the tax sale purchaser can go and pick up the deed to the house from the city, and then they can file what's called a writ for possession of the house. So that's really the final step before which the homeowner would need to be out. And again, this is where the timeline really depends on what the purchaser does. So it can be hard to predict exactly how quickly they'll move forward in that process. So it's important to talk to an attorney if you need more time. The other thing I always tell people to note is that this is the point in the process where there could be a bid balance. So in the auction in May, when the tax sale happens, investors will often buy the lien for more than what the face value of the lien is. So let's say you owed $5,000 in taxes, the tax sale purchaser might bid $20,000 on it. The owner has a right to the balance, which would be $15,000 in my example. So there's actually a process by which you can contact the city and claim that balance. So this is something that a lot of clients I've had in that situation will get solicitations in the mail from people offering to help them get that money, but it's their money to get. So you shouldn't pay anyone for that information. You should contact the collector and ask them what the process is to get that balance, and that's your right to get. So that's a sort of final thing to know, is that there could be some funds left over in this process that you would have a right to claim.
Yep. Trying to look at the silver lining there when the worst has happened. So we're still amidst the COVID pandemic right now. So are there any relief or protection for properties that are or property owners who are going through tax foreclosures right now?
So the tax credit deadline got extended to October 31st. So that's one little bit of good news. There is a new state tax sale ombudsman position, and the tax sale ombudsman has a website that's actually done a really great job of keeping all of us up to date on the changes. So several counties postponed their tax sale, including Baltimore City. So in the summer, a lot of the tax sales happen in the summer and fall. That includes Prince George's, Howard, Washington, Dorchester, Hartford, Caroline, and Baltimore County. So all of those counties and the city moved it to the fall or summer. There's a few counties that haven't announced new dates, like Allegheny. This is the last time I checked. Calvert, Garrett, and Montgomery. I think they haven't announced a new date for their tax sale this year, and then there are a few counties that canceled until 2021, and those are Anne Arundel, Carroll, Charles, Kent, Queen Anne's, Talbot, and Worcester. But I would encourage folks to check with their local county tax collector, or check the Maryland State Tax Sale Ombudsman's website for the latest information about which counties moved their tax sale back. There was also a pause in the tax foreclosure process in the courts from March 18th to July 25th. But at this point, those tax foreclosures are able to move forward. And I think that's all the updates that I know of so far.
Thank you. That's a very thorough update. So I think that's all the questions that we have prepared ahead of time. Let's go ahead and turn to Megan for a question from the audience or common questions that we hear from clients.
Thanks, Cindy. Hey, Robin.
Hi.
So just a couple of questions for you. And this is sort of a more, not really a legal question, but do you know how many properties go to tax sale in Baltimore each year? Does it vary? Is there a typical number?
I don't know the number off the top of my head, but it's thousands. And they get published every year in the Baltimore Sun. So, and they also get published on the website Bid Baltimore, which is kind of more set up for investors. But it is a large number of properties in tax sale. And I should say, wearing my old community law center hat, a lot of the properties that go into tax sale are actually vacant and abandoned properties that nobody bids on. So there's properties with very large liens. If the city demolishes a house, for example, that's a lien that can go to tax sale. So there's a lot of properties that are just underwater that go in tax sale year after year.
Okay. And then you mentioned that there's not an exact fixed number owed that sends somebody's house or property onto the tax sale list. But once someone hits like 750, do all houses, like say you owe 750 property taxes, do all houses go to tax sale, or might it happen 5 years from now? Might it happen, does it always happen?
So there is a threshold amount. I'm sorry if I misspoke earlier. So there's a threshold amount that can push you into tax sale. And I think the lowest amount, I want to say it's 250, but for owner occupied, it's higher than that. And it varies from city to county. So, you don't go to tax sale for a very low amount unless the property is generally vacant and abandoned. But the threshold that pushes you into tax sale, I'm sorry, I don't know it off the top of my head. I should, but it's in the city. I think it was 750, but I think it's like 1,200 now, or something in that range. And the threshold amount is important, but also in some ways the important thing is to pay as much on the bill as you can and to get it as low as you can.
Okay. So any property that hits 750 is likely to go to tax sale, or could it continue to kind of like pile? Does the city notice right away, I guess, when you hit that threshold?
Yeah, I mean, it's all just based on the financials at that point. So if you're $1 over the threshold, it's going to go. Okay. I think there's maybe a few things that they have discretion on, but not much discretion. So if it's over a certain amount, it's going to go to tax sale if it's owner occupied.
Okay. And then what happens do most houses sell during tax sale? Is there a chance that someone's property won't get sold during the tax sale, and sort of what happens then?
So the lien gets sold in the tax sale, and it is possible that nobody will pick it up in the tax sale. So the investors are generally involved in it to make money. So they tend to bid on properties that are probably worth a lot, that have a low tax bill, because those are properties that are most likely to redeem. That's generally speaking, it's not always the case. Some tax sale purchasers might be interested in a certain area in development or something. But generally speaking, if the property doesn't get picked up in the tax sale, the lien reverts back to the city. So the city still holds the right to collect on that, or the county, on that bill, and could still foreclose on the rights to redeem. It's also possible in rare instances after the sale, someone can pick up this tax certificate, what's called an over-the-counter sale. So in rare instances, I don't see a lot of those, but sometimes the tax sale certificate will be picked up after the sale. So even if nobody invests in the tax sale certificate in that May sale, it doesn't mean your tax bill goes away. It's definitely still there, still accruing interest, and still something you should address and prioritize.
Okay. So this person is saying that they paid their property taxes, and I'm not clear if that means after they originally got a notice that their house was going to tax sale or previously, but that they're still getting notices about tax sale. So is that an error the city makes sometimes, and what can they do?
Yeah, so I actually saw this sort of recently. I think maybe this sort of has to do with the COVID pandemic and processing delays in the payments, but it's important to really keep your records, keep proof that you paid the bill, that you paid the full bill. So that's another thing to make sure is maybe you paid part of the bill, but not enough to go below the threshold to continue getting the notices. I think the notices do sort of go automatically out from the city. So I've seen at least one instance where somebody paid, but the notice had, the payment kind of crossed in the mail with the notice. So the notice automatically went out. In that instance, I would, follow up with the city tax collector and make sure that they received your payment and that you don't owe anything else, and that you're, in the clear.
Okay. And this is a interesting question. I think part of the reason people get surprised about tax sales. So this person says, I paid off my mortgage in full. So they had a 30-year mortgage and it's been paid off for a couple of years. But I guess they didn't pay their taxes. How can my house go to tax sale despite the fact that I own my house outright because I paid off my mortgage?
Yeah, so this is one reason that tax sale affects older folks a lot more is a lot of older adults have paid off their mortgage. So they own the house outright. And a lot of times when you have a mortgage, most times you pay your property taxes as part of your mortgage. Your taxes and your insurance are part of your escrow. So, a lot of older folks who have paid off their mortgage, who were used to paying a mortgage payment every month, don't realize that once that mortgage is done, you still have property taxes. Property taxes go on forever, basically. It's death and taxes, right? You're only sure things in life. So you have to still pay your property taxes even when you've paid the mortgage. The other thing I'll note that I see, unfortunately, a lot of times are reverse mortgages. So a lot of older adults who take out reverse mortgages, some reverse mortgages don't have the property taxes escrowed, which again means that you're on the hook for them. And if you don't pay them, the other thing that will sometimes happen, occasionally this happens with mortgages as well, is the mortgage company will come in and swoop in and pay the property taxes to protect their interest, and then the mortgage company will foreclose on the default balance if you don't pay them back. So it can get a little complicated with mortgages, and talking to a HUD certified housing counselor or an attorney in those situations is a good way of going to kind of figure out what your rights are in that scenario.
Okay. This person is asking, and maybe I don't think I understand the question, but maybe you will, since you're our expert.
Okay.
Well, I guess I do. What, if anything, does the mortgage holder do in a tax sale? What's the
mortgage company? Yeah. So like I said, a lot of mortgages have taxes escrowed. It really depends on your mortgage, what they do. Reverse mortgages sometimes do not have taxes escrowed. So if your mortgage does have those property taxes escrowed, they should be paying them. One thing to know though is you should still apply for the homeowner's tax credit even if you have a mortgage, because that could be you could lower your mortgage payment when they figure out your escrow for the year. So again, everyone who qualifies for the homeowner's tax credit should apply early, because it could reduce what you owe. So the mortgage company, if your taxes are escrowed, would then submit the tax payment to the city or county. If they're not escrowed, again, it's going to be on you as the owner to pay the property taxes. And, taxes are one of those areas where, just like your personal income taxes, like you just got to remember every year to pay those. So even if something goes wrong with the city or county sending you notice, you're still on the hook to pay those. So that's why, I know credit card bills and medical bills, they might be the people calling you about your bills. But the more important bill to maintain your house is your property tax bill. So make sure those are getting paid and getting paid on time, and you're getting any tax credits that you have that you can get.
Okay. And I think this is our last question, unless another one comes in. This person asked, what is the purpose of the high bid balance? Why would a tax sale purchaser bid more than the balance that's due on the property taxes?
So the way so there's a couple things. There's a thing called high bid premium, and I'm just not even going to talk about it because it's really complicated. And for homeowners, you don't even need to deal with it. But the reason a purchaser might bid more than the liens do is because they want to win the bid. So it's just like on eBay or something, right? It's a competitive process. The investors are bidding against each other, and so they'll bid up in order to win the bid. And the highest bidder is going to be the one that gets the lien certificate, gets the lien to foreclose upon. So that's why they bid up, because if the house is valuable, it'll be worth winning that bid. And like I said, at the very end of the process, generally, the owner would have a right to claim the difference between the lien and what the purchaser bid on the house. I should note that one thing that's really difficult about tax sales to watch is that the property goes into the tax sale for the amount of the taxes due. And a lot of times purchasers don't, they might bid above that, but they don't generally bid all the way up to the value of the house. So the problem with the tax sale for a lot of owners is you're losing a lot of the equity you have in your house. So your house might be worth $100,000, but your tax bill might be like $2,000. So what's important to know is that you're going to be losing all of that equity if you're not able to come forward and redeem the house from tax sale.
Okay. Okay, well, I think that's all the questions that came in. So we'll bring Cindy back to wrap things up.
Thank you, Megan. So, yep, we're towards the end of the show. Robin, for our fellow Marylanders out there, what do you think is the most important, or a couple of most important things you would like our viewers to know about tax sales?
Apply for the homeowner's tax credit every year. And if you need help applying, the homeowner's property tax credit office, there's also a great resource available through Maryland Consumer Rights Coalition for older adults. Their program is called Securing Older Adult Resources. They have a couple social workers that will work with you to help you apply for your homeowner's tax credit. And if you're facing tax sale foreclosure, get an attorney as early as possible in the process. We can research what your options are and assert any defenses you might have in the case. So
Yep,
don't go it alone.
Absolutely. And Maryland Legal Aid is here to help for those who need it. So make sure you're contacting us if you do need to speak to a lawyer. Thank you so much, Robin. It has been a great conversation. I have learned so much. And suddenly I feel like there's so much more that I don't know about tax sales. In general, we do appreciate your time. So, dear viewers out there, next week I will be talking with Maryland Legal Aid's housing law expert, Douglas Nivens. I am so sorry, Doug, that I mispronounced your last name. I'll be sure to get that right next week. But either way, will be here next week to answer your questions about rent court updates and what to do if you're being evicted right now. So if you do have a question about what's happening with rent court or evictions or some landlord tenant issues, make sure you're leaving a comment down below so we can get those questions in. You can email us or private message us if you want to remain anonymous. And remember, if you do find these videos helpful, please share this video if you can. And until next Tuesday, then, thank you so much for watching and have a good rest of the week.